to do with free will. Because Nevuah is not about God, it's about us. And you're not to say that we don't have the ability to raise ourselves to that madrega. But the fact is, Nevuah ended. Okay, Nevuah, the era of Nevuah is 1,000 years. I think it's exactly 1,000 years. From 2448 till 3448. I have reasons to make that claim, but I don't want to go into why and how I know this. During that period of time, there were 1.2 million men and women. 1,000 years, 1.2 million, on average 12,000 new prophets a year. That's a lot of people. Nevuah in the time of the first Beis HaMikdash and the time before and a little bit after was as normal as today at Talmud Chacham. And there was a whole way of life that conditioned you for Nevuah. And as the Rambam is going to say, you'll see soon, you did all the preparing. And then Hashem decided, if he wanted to give you Nevuah, you experienced it. If he didn't want to give you Nevuah, you didn't experience it. But if a person experienced Nevuah once, they were never the same again. Because the experience of Nevuah was literally meeting God. And once you meet him, you can't forget the experience. You can't forget it. You can't deny God when you experienced him intimately. That's the experience of Nevuah. That's really what it is. Okay? I want to start today's class here. The end of Halacha Aleph. If you got the new copies, there's an arrow. You see where I'm reading? It's the last 4 lines of Halacha Aleph. If and when the spirit, and again, it can be either a man or a woman. The Nevuah is not limited to gender. And by the way, it's not even limited to Jewish people. Although Moshe Rabbeinu said, "V'niflinu," Moshe Rabbeinu asked that there should be no more goyish neviim. In theory, a non-Jew can live this kind of lifestyle and raise himself to a level where he's worthy that the Shekhinah should rest on him. That's a possibility. And the prototype, who was the prototype of a goy? Who was Zeichet to Nevuah, do you know? Huh? Bilam. No. Eoiv, Job, Eoiv. Eoiv was not Jewish, and Eoiv is a prophet. And he has 4 other friends who come to visit him who are also prophets. Now, what you don't know about Eoiv is that the book of Eoiv was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. Sefer Eoiv is the oldest book of Tanakh in terms of chronology. Ish Hayav Eretz Utz V'Eoiv Shmei. It was written by Moshe.
How do you spell?
Eoiv, in Hebrew or in English?
English.
J-O-B, Job.
Job.
Yeah. Eoiv. And he was a Navi. He was a prophet of God. There's a whole bunch of opinions when he lived, and according to certain opinions, he lived in the time of David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, the Churban Bayis Rishon, after Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Eibishter, V'niflinu ani v'yamcha. So prophecy is not only limited to, he says, men and women. You could live in a goy, you can have Nevuah. But you can certainly do the work, but you need a special kind of personality. If you live in America, as they like to say, and you take vaccinations, and you drink our water, and you breathe our air, you're cuckoo, there's no way. You have to be a special. I'm joking because I don't believe that. It takes a special kind of person with a special kind of personality and a special kind of drive for this even to be possible. And then you have to do the work. But I want to show you this. Look at the end of the paragraph, okay? You live a pristine life. Nevi'im lived solitary lives. They didn't argue, they didn't sit in the basement and scream at each other. They're very thoughtful. They spoke softly. They listened more than they talked because they were deep. They were not trying to show off. There was nothing about them, look, I'm smarter than you. It was always, what's the truth? And they'd be alone by themselves a lot. They would engage in trying to understand what's beyond the universe, what's beyond time, what's beyond space, what God is. This is what their passion was. And this lifestyle, and there was a number of characteristics, that to be happy, that to be solitudinous, that to be non-argumentative, they have to have a whole series of character traits, and you live a certain lifestyle, and it makes it possible for you to experience Nevuah. Now, what happens when you actually experience Nevuah? This is where we're holding. Ube'ez shetanach aleim shetanuach Allah haruach. When the spirit rests on this person, so listen to the language. Tisarev nafshe, the person's nefesh, his soul, will become entangled, become mixed. B'mailas hamalachim hanikroyim ishim, with the level of angels that are called ishim. We talked about this last week. According to the Rambam, the shayrish of the word ishim is ish. The lowest levels of angels, the angels closest to people, are called ishim because they're like people. According to Kabbalah and Hasidus, ishim is from the word eish, which means fire. So they argue about the levels of the malachim. The Rambam has 10 names for malachim. In Hilchos, as I said earlier in this halachas, and he puts them into categories. And the lowest is ishim. We hold that ishim is the same thing as srafim, malachim of fire, the highest madrege. But the Rambam holds that ishim means malachim that are so close to people that somehow we can sort of link up with them. When a person engages in these intellectual pursuits, they become close enough to relate to the thinking of a malach, the lowest angels. But angels don't have a body. Angels don't eat and sleep. Angels don't have any distractions. She has to be a very, very special kind of person who's a physical human being in a physical body that can sort of get caught up in the thinking of a being that's completely metaphysical, non-physical, or completely ruchniistic. Okay, and you become a different person. The experience of becoming nevuah, even if it happens to you once in your life, is transformative. Because you're literally experiencing godliness, experiencing God. Now, I tried to explain this to you in the past. You must understand, if there is 1,200,000 people who are Nevi'im, it's an awful lot of people. We have a record in Tanakh of 55 of them. That's it. 48 men and 7 women. And there's a Rashi, I think in Masechet Rosh Hashanah or Megillah, where he actually lists each of them. 7 women, and they're famous, of course, Sarah and Abigail and Esther and Cholda. There's a list of the 7 women and the 48 men. And Rashi tries to figure out who the 48 men are, which means almost none of the Nevi'im, we even know their name. Because the people whose names we know, these are the greatest prophets, the highest. Because these were prophets who gave messages for us from God. And moreover, they gave messages for us from God that are for always, for the future. The Gemara says, only those prophecies which are needed for later generations was written down, otherwise it wasn't written down. Most Nevi'im, most people who experience Nevuah, and believe me, I have no idea what that is, but this was just in this forum, they got a hello from God. How was Machta? What's your name?
Hi, Rizal.
Huh?
Hi, Rizal.
Hi, Rizal, hello. You got a wink from God. That's it. In other words, there was not always even a message. Sometimes just, hello, I'm here. And even if there was a message, it wasn't necessarily for you to tell somebody else. It was for you. Nevuah was a meeting between God and man based on man's deservedness. Nevuah is not Hashem having a message. That's not how that works. Nevuah is a person being worthy. The expression in the Gemara is Shetish Ralav Shechina, that the Shechina should rest on him or her. Nevuah is about us. Nevuah is about a human being refining himself and purifying himself. The magic word in this discussion is precious, separating himself from the world, living a higher, pristine, more metaphysical life, to the extent that they're worthy that the Eibusher should meet them, or him or her, face to face. And often an experience of Nevuah was you experienced the Eibusher, and there wasn't even a message. You didn't even necessarily know what God said, you just met him, you know. And sometimes there was also a message, but the message was only for you. Take out the garbage. Listen to your wife. I was in Pittsburgh a few weeks ago, and I met a kid. I knew his father almost 50 years ago in California. And his father once told me when he was quite drunk on the Shabbos afternoon, the Rebbe told me, I gotta listen to my wife. The Rebbe sent him a letter. This goes back to the early 80s. Do whatever your wife says. So I meet his kids who are now parents of children themselves in Pittsburgh, and I told them this. They never heard of it. And they went home and they told it to their father, and their mother said, it's true. The Rebbe wrote a letter to my husband. Listen to me. Anyway, So Nevuah is a lot more dynamic than we think. It's not just Hashem has to send the messenger. Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshaya, these were the greatest Nevi'im. Because they were Nevi'im to lead the Jewish people. Most Nevi'im was a private thing. You prepare yourself, and you're worthy, and Hashem meets you, and it's for you. It's the highest level of Avodas Hashem. I told this to you in the past. Rambam has a book called Shmoyne Parakim. It's his introduction to Pirkei Avos. In this book, Shmoyne Parakim, the Rambam is explaining the word chosid. That's his message. What's a chosid? And in the world of Rambam, a chosid is a person who's so pure in his life or her life that they merit nevuah. The end of Chassidus, according to the Rambam, is nevuah, but it's not magic. You earned it. You deserve that the Shekhinah should rest upon you because of the way you lived your life. That is nevuah. So you experience nevuah, you're never the same again. You meet God. Okay?
So 1.2 million people?
Over the course of 1,000 years, achieved that. How many people tried? We'll never know. Right? So it was a cultural thing. It was a norm. This goes to our history in a very, very deep way. In the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, spirituality was more important than halacha. They kept mitzvahs, but it was about spirituality. The Anshe Chesed Gedela saw the end of Nevuah, and they saw the whole thing was going to destroy the nation. They reconfigured, they recentered Yiddishkeit away from Nevuah to halacha, to Gemara, Tesh B'Peh.
So Nevuah was the cause of that?
Yeah.
Because of Avodah Zarah also.
Nevuah was going away. Nevuah was going away. The Ruach HaKodesh left. When the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed and Gedalia ben Achikam was murdered, all the Jews left the land. When they came back, the Ruach HaKodesh didn't come back. They knew Nevuah was going to end. So they made a shift in the center of Jewish life towards Talmudism. See, so when Chassidus came along and Kabbalah came along, the Misnagdim are screaming, we gave that up a long time ago. And we're answering, yeah, we're getting closer to Mashiach. And we're going back to that. It's a taste of the idea that life is about spirituality. You understand? Relationship with the Eibishter. That's what, so it was a culture, it was a way of life. The highest kind of Jew was not a scholar. The highest kind of Jew was a spiritualist. A person who was in touch with the Eibishter. Intimately, directly. But let's read this, please, okay? The Yavin B'daite, he'll understand in his mind, She'enei K'may Shehaya, he's no longer what he was, Ela Shenis'ala Al Mailas Shar B'nei Adam HaChachamim, he's been raised up of all of the people, including people of Chol Chachamim. What do I want to talk? Why did I choose to repeat this? Because there's an issue here that I want to touch on. It's very controversial, and honestly, I'm not as prepared as I was hoping to be. I'm not going to say I'm unprepared, but I'm not as prepared as I'm hoping to be. And that is the place of malachim in Nevuah. Angels. When a person experiences Nevuah, it's through the help of the malach. And that's the meaning of this. Tisarev nafshe b'malas hamalachim and ikrayim ishim. Now, I don't have time to give you a long speech, but a short speech I'm going to give you. You may or may not know that Jewish theology has two fields. Jewish has two courses, two ways. The non-mystics, those who didn't study Kabbalah, that means philosophers, and the mystics, the people who studied Kabbalah. And who's an example of a non-mystic that was a big philosopher? The Rambam, the Ibn Ezra, the Ralbag, the Yehuda Halevi, or the Kuzari, the Psadi Gon, famous personalities who were not Mekubalim. And then who's considered a Mekubal? Obviously, Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, Rab Akiva, yeah. But the Ramban, the Nachmanides, the Rabbeinu Bechaya, the Rabbeinu Yoine, the Ravid, and of course later on, the Arizal, and then in Hasidus, there were these two schools of thought within philosophy. And they usually argue about things in a very, very aligned way. They usually align themselves. Here is one of those rare cases where they agree, and I don't understand why. Kinderlach, you can't play in my class. I'm sorry. I have no patience for this. Please. I'm sorry. I just have no patience. It's one of those rare cases where the Mekubalim and the Chaykim agree. The Ramban, who's a Mekubal, agrees with the Rambam, who's not a Mekubal, that every Nevuah is through a Malach. You can't experience prophecy without the help of an angel. Now, the philosopher's reason for needing an angel, I think I understand. But why do the mystics, why do the Mekubalim need a malach? I really don't understand why Mekubalim need a malach. And I'll explain to you why. I'll try to explain to you why, okay? Nevuah means meeting God. That's what it means. Having an experience, which is an intimacy with Hashem. Okay? Now, in Kabbalah, that means experiencing Ein Sof, experiencing godliness, godly light. Philosophers don't have such a thing. There's no concept of Ein Sof in philosophy. It doesn't exist. Because philosophy has no concept of Ein Sof, the whole idea of meeting God is hard to understand because God doesn't exist in a way that could meet us. So in philosophy, meeting God is really meeting evidence of Hashem, proof of Hashem. Philosophy and mysticism, when it comes to these sensitive issues, are very, very, very different. I'm going to give you an example, okay? In Chumash, you read in Parshas Beshalach, which was 2 weeks ago, and in a couple of weeks from here now, where Hashem appears in the camp. Remember that? In Chumash, yeah, Hashem appears in the camp. How does Hashem appear? A cloud. Correct? Since when is God a cloud? So the mystics and the philosophers are going to argue about that cloud, what it means. The mystics, the Kabbalah, are going to say that that cloud is a manifestation of godliness. It's godliness in a physical form, like the Adar, like the Holy Ark was godliness in a physical form. But the philosophers don't hold that. The philosophers will call that cloud kavod nivra. Nivra means a creation. Kavod, that represents. Hashem isn't a cloud. Hashem isn't anything. But he wants you to see him. He sends you a cloud, and the cloud's representing him. So philosophers and mystics have a very, very big difference in how they understand any reference to divine revelation. What does it mean Hashem is revealed? To the Mekubalim, Hashem is revealed means you experience Oid, Ein Sof, godliness. But mystics don't have godliness. Philosophers don't have godliness. So they have to come up with an explanation where you're seeing a creation, a physical or not metaphysical creation, not godliness, that's somehow representing Hashem and impressing Hashem upon you. It's hard to understand how philosophers understand this. So when it comes to Nevuah, it's the same thing. That Mekubalim would say, what's prophecy? Experiencing godliness. What's philosophy? Experiencing an angel. And an angel, malachim are not God, they're creations. And somehow this malach is representing the Eibishter. It's proof, it's a gestalt, it's a representation of a lakus that somehow brings with it a certainty, a force that you know that it's true, that it comes from Hashem. But there's no thing as experiencing. A lot of philosophers don't have that concept. So when it comes to Nevuah, that philosophers say you can't have Nevuah without a malach yet. But the Mekubalim agree, and I have a problem. I don't understand why. I really do not understand why the Mekubalim agree with the philosophers at this question. There cannot be Nevuah without a malach. Now, I have a suspicion of an answer, but I didn't spend enough time looking it up. So I feel a little bit wrong saying this, but this is the kind of question you have to look up. You find in Ramban, who's one of the great Mekubalim of yesteryear, that sometimes you will call godliness an angel also. There's two kinds of angels, in other words. There's angels that are creation, and there are angels that are expressions of God. In the Ramban's language, it's called Hamalach HaGoyel, the redeeming angels. They're malachim, but they're not separate from the Lakus, they're expressions of the Eibishter. And perhaps that's what they mean. That's what the Mekubalim mean. When the Mekubalim say that you can't have the Nevuah without a malach, they mean godliness. They don't mean a nivra, creation. But if that's not true, I really do not understand why the Mekubalim need malach. The bottom line is everybody agrees, as far as I know. Both schools of thought in theology say a person who experiences God, the malach is in the middle. The malach facilitates it, makes it happen. For a person to experience Nevuah, which is literally an experience of godliness, the malach's got to be in the middle, okay? So for me, this is a fascinating subject because I live over there. I'm one of those weird people who lives in that place that no one's interested in. But there's one more thing that's very more interesting. That there's an exception to this rule. There's an exception to the rule that you cannot be Nevu without a Malach. And again, the Chayikim and the Balam agree. The philosophers also say that this exception holds true. There was one person who experiences Nevu without the help of Malach. And that's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu. And you have it in last week's Parsha, Parshas Mishpatim. Now, when we were here last Wednesday, it was Parshas Shavua Parsha. That Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to send an angel who's going to protect you and bring you into Eretz Yisrael and so on. So everybody gets nervous about this Malach, because in 2 weeks from now, in Parshas Kisisa, Hashem is going to tell Moshe to tell Hashem, if you're sending an angel, we're not going. Moshe Rabbeinu says, if you're not going to take us yourself, we're staying here. You want us to go into Eretz Yisrael? Al ta'aleinu mizeh. If you're going to send a malach, an angel, to lead us to Eretz Yisrael, we're staying here. You have to do it yourself. And Hashem tells to Moshe Rabbeinu, okay, I'll go myself, and the malach will come to your successor, Yeshua bin Nun, Joshua. When he came into Eretz Yisrael, there's a famous description in the Navi how a malach came to meet him, dressed up like a man, and he was the angel that helped Yeshua do his wars and his experiences nevuah. But Moshe Rabbeinu experienced his nevuah. Moshe Rabbeinu led the Jewish people himself. There was no angel between him and God, or as a lot of the Rishonim say, Moshe was the malach. Moshe himself was his own angel. Moshe is the exception to this rule that there cannot be nevuah without a malach. He was his own malach. Like we find in Tanakh, it's also mentioned about Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayishlach Hashem malach. Malach means a shliach. An angel could be a representative, a shliach. That Moshe Rabbeinu experienced nevuah directly from the Eibush, that he was his own angel. He was the angel to bring the nevuah to him. But aside from Moshe Rabbeinu, the way I understand it from the Rishonim, you cannot have nevuah without the help of a malach. I don't understand why the Mekubalim need malachim, unless my supposition is correct, that the malachim that the Mekubalim are talking about are sfiris. If the malachim are sfiris, then it makes sense, because that's the difference between Kabbalah and Hakira, Elokus, godliness, and sfiris and godliness. Okay, now, if you want to comment on what I just said, you're welcome to. I needed to say that because otherwise I would have suffered angel withdrawal. I have to have my fix of spiritual stuff. And if you're good, we're going to move to halacha base. We're actually going to read the next halacha. Yes, go ahead.
So is your qualms with it because if you're experiencing nevuah, it's supposed to be intimate and just being Hashem. So how is there someone in the middle? Is that like your qualm with how an angel?
Yeah, my qualm for the Kabbalists. The Kabbalists, or the Mekubalim. I don't know, how long are you in this class?
Just today.
Oh, okay. So this is, I'm answering you, but I have to limit it because Hashem is called the Metzias, Bilti Metzias. You understand what that means? Hashem exists without existing. There's no form, he has no gestalt, he has no definition, he has no limit. And he doesn't interact. Hashem doesn't meet anybody. There's no such thing.
Except for Moshe Rabbeinu.
Wait. So when you read about Hashem meeting us, it becomes right away a question. How does that happen? So the Kabbalists have a very good answer. A very, very good answer. It's called Hashemliness. God with a last name, Elokus, godliness, which is a long conversation, which is not for now. But all of Kabbalah is this one word. The whole novelty of Chochmas Kabbalah is that Hashem has a face. Hashem has a light that you could touch and be touched by. You can't touch him, but you can touch his light. And touching his limb is the same. Touching his light is the same as touching him for reasons that I'm not going to get into. You understand what I just said? Yes. The philosophers don't have Hashemliness. They don't. So the philosophers have a big question. What does it mean God talks to man? What does it mean? Hashem doesn't have a mouth, Hashem doesn't have a voice, Hashem doesn't have a form. What does it mean God talks to man? And that's why you look at that Rambam. The Rambam in the Meir Nevuchim brings Targum Onkelos, the Targum on the Chumash that we have, and he shows you how Onkelos is careful to use words to explain that there's no such thing as Hashem talking to you. Hashem creates a gestalt. You speak German.
No.
You know what gestalt means?
No.
Look it up in the dictionary. Gestalt means a form, a representation. And this gestalt is representing him. It's without an H. Gestalt. I think it's how it's spelled, okay? That form represents it. And when you say Hashem spoke to man, Hashem created words that are creations. And he allows man to experience those words. And somehow, he does something to those words that man knows that they came from God. But you don't see him. You can't experience him. He doesn't exist. Like the example of the cloud. A cloud, it's a physical cloud. But when that cloud shows up, you know it's God. How do you know? It's not just because of timing. It's because there's a certain, the word that is hakika, there's a certain force that tells you this is representing the Eibishter, but you never meet him. But in Kabbalah, you do meet him because there's Hashem, there's himliness, there's godliness. So when it comes to the question of prophecy, why the philosophers need a malach, it's obvious. But why do the mystics? Unless the malach about which the mystics are speaking is godliness. You understand? But this, I never saw this explanation. The questions bothered me for a very long time. And I'm just raising it because I want to.
I read something else, we can skip it if it's not. Like, I'm thinking, well, the way you actually interact with Hashem is like by learning Torah. But is that also just like...
That's not intimacy. That's not intimacy.
Why not?
Because it's not. You're not feeling him. You're sitting in the same room with me, right? You don't believe that you see it. You're sitting in the same room with God. You don't see it, you believe it. Nevuah is seeing it. It's quite a big difference. Halacha, let's go. I'm reading the underlined, people. I'm reading the underlined, okay? Ha-neviim, mailois, hey. Prophets have levels. Now, the reason this is important, people, the reason this is important, at least in my opinion, is because you must appreciate that Nevuah is not magic. Prophecy is not, it's not even a miracle. Prophecy is not something very special happening. Prophecy is a human being making himself very special. It's on the person. It's on the person. We're going to learn a sikha after this, where the Rebbe brings the first words at the top of the page. And the meaning of those words is, one of the principles of our faith is that Hashem created people with the ability to become so whole, to become so great, that they deserve intimacy with God, they deserve to see God. And Nevuah is about us. It's about our preparedness. And people who are on different levels. There are smarter people, people less smart. There are people who have more self-control, and people less self-control. There are people who have broader das, people have less broad das. And the Nevuah changes accordingly. The Navi affects the Nevuah. If you're a small person, all of these people are giants. Any person who experiences person is a giant. But within the realm of giants, you're a smaller giant. So you experience Nevuah on a lower level. And if the realm of person, you're a bigger giant, so you experience Nevuah on a higher level. I mentioned this to you in the past. And the Rambam writes in the aforementioned Shemona Parakim, where the Rambam talks about Chassidus, and that according to the Rambam, the end of Chassidus is Nevuah, that you don't have to be perfect to be a Navi. Even though here it says you have to be perfect. The Rambam says you don't have to be perfect to be a Navi. It means proof. Does anybody remember who his proof is? Remember what I told you? His proof is Shlomo Melech. King Solomon was a Navi. He wrote 3 Sfarim in Tanakh. Mishle, Shir Hashem, and Kehelos. Proverbs, Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes. And he was not perfect. Shlomo Melech was not David HaMelech. Shlomo Melech was not perfect. But he was great enough for Nevuah. So the Rambam says, Nevuah has levels. Hanavim, Mailois, Hein. Prophecy is levels. And he explains. When it comes to knowledge, to wisdom, there's Chacham Gadol Mechavei. One person is smart, one person is less smart. Kach Nevuah, the same is true in prophets. Navi Gadol mi Navi. One prophet is greater than another prophet. Why? If nevuah is Hashem tapping you on the shoulder, hey, go tell the Jewish people I said such and such. If prophecy is, as some of the other Rishonim says, the Ikrim says, Hashem has a message, and He chooses a messenger, and who the messenger doesn't matter. Hashem he has to tell you a message. Yeah? He has to send you a message. So He needs to find a messenger. So He chooses Shmerel or Shoshana or whatever it is, Betel or Bracha, to be His emissary. Then all nevuah will be the same because it's about God's message. But since nevuah is not about God's message, nevuah is about a person raising himself to a level where he's worthy for the Shekhinah to rest on him. Since people are different, and their worthiness is different, and their level is different, their prophecy is different. Fashes. And he continues and he says, the kulon, and all of them, ein reyin mare hanavua, they do not experience the vision of prophecy, ella, but only, number one, when they're sleeping, in their dream, they'll have a vision. Nevi'im experience nevuah in chalemis, in dreams. But when you experience nevuah in a dream, it's called a chaleim emes, a true dream. Torah says, the pasuk says, and halacha says, chaleim is shavi. Dreams are considered false. There's no validity to dreams. I'll give you an interesting example. For those who learn Rambam, we learned this halacha recently. If you have a dream in the middle of the night, and some old man comes to you and says, listen, you live on Wilshire Boulevard, yeah. Behind your house there's a garden. Go into the garden and go to this and this spot and you'll dig and you'll find a treasure. Take that treasure and go to La Cienega Boulevard and you'll find so and so. Give him the treasure because I stole it from his grandfather. If you have a dream, someone comes to you and says, you'll find treasure and it belongs to Shmerel. And you get up in the morning and you take your shovel and you dig and you find the treasure. You find it there. Api halacha, you do not have to return it. Someone comes to you in a dream and says, please take this and give it to him. And you find it, you can keep it. It was true enough to help you find the treasure, but it's not true enough to obligate you to go and do it. That's the halacha. That's the din in Shulchan Aruch. That's the halacha in Rambam.
But why?
Because halacha does not give validity to dreams. Finish. However you explain the fact that it helped you find treasure, there's no halachic requirement for you to return it. But there are occasions when a dream is nevuah. And that's another story. If a person has a dream, as Madrid said, what the dream told him, because that's God talking to you. That's not just the wires getting crossed and things funny happening because the celestial bodies are getting confused up there. When Hashem speaks to you, and when you experience nevuah, understand, there is a certitude, there's a certainty that Hashem is talking to you. To the mystics, because you're experiencing godliness. And to the philosophers, you're experiencing an image, you're seeing a gestalt, you're seeing a picture, you're seeing a form. And there's a power that makes you understand and know this is emes. This is true. I think I mentioned this to you in the previous class, that the previous Rebbe asked the Rebbe Rashab, the previous Rebbe asked his father, the Rebbe Rashab, how is Mashiach going to know he's Mashiach? Did I tell you this? Did I tell you this?
No.
Of course I told you this.
No.
I never told this to you? You don't remember?
Let's see.
The Frierdiker Rebbe asked his father, the Rebbe Rashab, how Mashiach is, he's Mashiach. So the Rebbe Rashab answered his son with a question. When Hashem told Avraham Avinu to take his son to the Akedah, take his own son, put him in his bed and kill him, how did he know it was real? And then the Rebbe Rashab tells the Frierdiker Rebbe, there's levels of Nevuah. But the greatest Nevi'im, they have no doubt. They're sure. Which means Nevuah is more ephemeral. It's more spiritual than we think. It's possible to experience Nevuah, and the degree of certitude can be different from person to person. The greatest Nevi'im have no doubt. But when you experience a Nevuah in a dream, that's not a dream. That's a message from God. That you got to listen to. But if you stop as though you have a dream and you're not a Navi, halachically, what you should do, I'm not telling you, but according to Jewish law, no obligation to return. And there's some wonderful stories. There's some cute stories. The first story is really disturbing. About 3 weeks after our Rebbe got married, our Rebbe married the previous Rebbe's daughter, Rebbe Chaim Mushk, whose yahrzeit we just had a week ago, 10 days ago, 12 days ago. 3 weeks after the wedding, Hey Tavis, Chamisha B'Tavis, the Rebbe wrote his first entry in the journal was Hey Tavis. Nichnasti al pi akriya, he starts. I went into my father-in-law because I was cold. I was summoned. And the previous Rebbe said to me, the Rebbe, the Shreya, was married 3 weeks. I have regards from your brother Label. The Rebbe had 2 brothers. There were 3 boys in the house. Mendel, Bedel, Label. The Rebbe was the oldest. The youngest was Label. The middle brother was Bedel. Mem Beis Lamed. Mendel, Bedel, Label. So the Rebbe in 1928 was 26. His brother was about 25, 23. So the previous Rebbe says to the Rebbe, I have regards from your brother. So the Rebbe says to him, you got a letter from him? He said, he was still living in Russia. He said, no. You got a telegram from him? He says, no. So I have regards from my brother. We were together in a dream. Yeah? The Frierdiker Rebbe tells the Rebbe, we were together in a dream. And he proceeds to tell him the dream. That he sees his father, the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab thanks him that when our Rebbe got married, the previous Rebbe put on a shtreimel. The Rebbe did not wear a shtreimel. The Frierdiker Rebbe wore a regular hat. When he became a Rebbe, he wore a hat. He didn't wear a shtreimel. The first time the previous Rebbe put on one of those fur hats was by our Rebbe's chasana, which was 8 years after he became a Rebbe. The first time he put on a shtreimel. So his father tells him in the dream, thank you for the shtreimel, thank you for the hat. And then the Rebbe Rashab sees the Rebbe's brother Label and says, who's that? The Rebbe and his brothers never saw the Rebbe Rashab. Their father didn't let him go to Lubavitch, which is really weird. So the Rebbe Rashab says, who's that? He didn't recognize. Come closer, come closer. And the Frierdiker says, I think he was biting his nails, and he had his hat down, blocking his face a little bit. And he makes a couple of steps forward, and the Rebbe Rashab says, I know you. They never met, I know you were. And then the Rebbe Rashab in the dream says, my Mercedes, I don't even know, but my Mercedes. And the previous Rebbe says to our Rebbe, ask your brother for the details. Ask your brother for the details. Meaning, the Frierdiker Rebbe was sure that the Rebbe's brother would have had the same dream, and he would be able to recall the Maimed and tell it to our Rebbe. You understand? The Frierdiker Rebbe called in our Rebbe. He says, I have regards for your brother. We were together, but the Rebbe was saying in a dream. Now, what kind of nonsense is that? The Vart is, it's called the Chalaim Emes. Most dreams are nonsense. A true dream is a level of Ruach HaKodesh. And the Frierdiker Rebbe knew about himself that when he sees his father in a dream, it's a Chizoyin Laila. He calls the Rambam's words, Chizoyin Laila. A vision at night. So he tells the Rebbe, I have regards from your brother, and you can ask him the details, he'll know. That's the first story. What's the second story?
Hold on, did he know the details?
That we don't know the end of the story. There's no record. We don't know. His brother left Russia a few years after. This was 1928. The Rebbe's brother left Russia about 1930, 31. And he lived with the Rebbe in Berlin. The Nazis beat him up, you know that? The Rebbe's brother was beaten to a pulp. There was a rally, and they all did this. And Label didn't do it. They almost killed him. They beat him to a pulp. They beat him, the Nazis, machma. But the Rebbe was with his brother in Berlin. Then he moved to Israel. And it's possible that they discussed it. It's possible they discussed it, but there's no record. Then, a second story, when the Frierdiker passed away, he was a famous chassid, his name was Rabbi Kazanovsky, who had a dream of the Frierdiker Rebbe, where the Frierdiker Rebbe tells him in the dream, Frierdiker Rebbe asks him, why is everyone so sad? In the dream, why is everyone so sad? So Rabbi Kazanovsky tells the previous Rebbe, we're all sad because you left us. You abandoned us. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, but I left my son-in-law, I left the Rebbe. And Rabbi Kazanovsky says, yeah, but he keeps on saying that you're still the Rebbe. He refuses to take the position. He says, you're still the Rebbe. So in his dream, the previous Rebbe turns to our Rebbe, and he tells him, in Ma Titzach Yadai, Kavos Shveistu Vegnieskashis zu mir daber ne Yisrael, so Chassidus to Yidden, V'Yisrael, there's a foreign and can't give Mashiach, and they will try to Mashiach. In other words, in the dream, the previous Rebbe, why are you screaming that people should be connected to me? You should speak your own Chassidus, and they'll go towards Mashiach Tzidkei. So Kazanovsky got up in the morning, he ran to 7-7, he ran into the Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe the dream. Aha, I got a story for you. The Rebbe made him repeat it twice, which was normal. The Rebbe made repeat something twice. We told him something to he went to hear it a second time. And when he finished, the Rebbe said, "That's not a real dream." And Kazan said, "Why not?" He says, "Because if it would have been a real dream, I would have had it also, because I was in the dream." That was the Rebbe's way of weaseling out of it. But I don't know. So you have two stories. One story is where Rebbe knows for sure. He says, "We had a dream. You can ask your brother. He was there too. And he knew that he would know." Verstehst? When the zweite Meise, I apologize. When the zweite Meise is where the Rebbe tells somebody it's not a real dream, because if it would have been a real dream, I would have had it too. So Kazanov says, "I had such a dream. How come I had such a dream?" So the Rebbe says, "You're probably thinking about it all day long. You concocted it in your imagination, so you dreamt it at night." I believe the Rebbe was weaseling out of it, but the Rebbe knew that there was credibility in that dream. And one last story about dreams that's mind-blowing. The first Lubavitch Rebbe was the Alter Rebbe, right? The Chabad Alter Rebbe was Chabad. He wasn't in Lubavitch. He was in Lozhin and Liadi. The second Chabad Rebbe was the middle Rebbe. Well, the third Chabad Rebbe was the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe had his name. The name was Menachem Ben. When the second Lubavitch Rebbe passed away, the middle Rebbe passed away, Tzemach Tzedek did not want to be a Rebbe. He didn't want the job. And he sent them to Shmedel and Bedel and Chaim and anybody but him. He told anybody he wants, just don't ask me. And the Chassidim went to different people. One of the possible candidates was a Jew who lived in Lubavitch, who was called in the house of the Rebbe the Fetter Yosele. The Fetter Yosele, the Fetter label. Oh, I'm forgetting. I think it was Fetter Yosele, Uncle Yosele, Uncle Label. I may be mixing up the names. Oh, my brain doesn't work anymore. I'm going to go with Yosel, but I'm not sure. Fetter Yosele. He was a big tzaddik. He was a big Gaon. He was a big chassid. And he was an uncle of the Tzemach Tzedek, because the Tzemach Tzedek's father married a second time. Tzemach Tzedek's mother died when he was 3. Tzemach Tzedek's mother passed away when he was 3. Alter Rebbe raised him. His father remarried. Tzemach Tzedek had half brothers and sisters. His father remarried, and the second Zivig had children. And this Fetter Yosele was an uncle of Tzemach Tzedek, because of whom his father married the second time, second Zivig. And they had a chavrus. They learned together, the two of them. Fetter Yosele was older than the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek was around 38. When the middle passed away, let's say he was 50. They learned together. One day they were learning, and they had a question, and they had no answer. They had a question and no answer. So they went away, finished. At night, both of them dreamt. That the Alter Rebbe came to them in a dream, and he walked into their chavrusa, and he heard their question, and he gave them the answer. The Fetter, I think it's labeled. Yes, we're going with Yosel. The Fetter Yosel wakes up in the morning. He remembers the dream. He remembers that the Alter Rebbe gave him an answer, but he can't remember what the answer was. He walks into his nephew, and on the Tzemach Tzedek's desk, the answer is already written up. Tzemach Tzedek woke up in the morning and wrote it down. So the Fetter Yosel says to the Tzemach Tzedek, "So who's supposed to be Rebbe, me or you?" They both had a dream. They both saw the same thing, but he didn't remember what the Rebbe said. And the Tzemach Tzedek wrote it down. This is, who's more qualified to be a Rebbe? You understand? This is Madrigas. And one last story about dreams, which is absolutely incredible, which I've told the story many, many times. I had a school teacher who I loved very much, because he loved me, but I think he loved everybody. I think I wasn't special. I just felt special because he just had this way about him. Mm-hmm. I learned in his class in 1976. It's almost 50 years ago. And I'm talking 25, 30 years after I left his class, whenever I would meet him. I was 10 years old. He would talk to me. He would tell me stories. He would share things with me. Very generous man. Very generous man. Unbelievably humble. So he told me, Rabbi Fuchs, told me that when he learned in Atlas, he lived in Poland, in the yeshiva in Berlin. So a Yid came from Russia, a big Lubavitcher Chazan came from Russia. His name was Berel Garfinkel. But everybody in Russia was called by their city. He was called Berel Kurnitzer. Kurnitzer is not in Muslim. He was probably 50 years old, and he was a bachelor. He never got married. He was single. Why didn't he get married? Because he had tuberculosis. He had on his lungs tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, I don't understand tuberculosis, but it's a time bomb. It could be dormant for a long time, and then overnight, boom, you keel over and you die. So he didn't get married. He was a bacher. When he came from Russia, he was a very, very big Talmud Chacham. He knew Shas by heart. He told me before that he wanted the boys to memorize everything by heart. He knew Kol HaTorah Kol HaVayah, had incredible memory. Everything had to be memorized. So when he came from Russia, he didn't need a lot of money, but they needed to give him a job, and he was a good person to have around. So they made up a position. He called him the boy. He was the tester. But he was good for him to be around. The Bacham saw a real Jew, and he raised their level of learning. He challenged them, and so on. So this Berel Kohen said lived all by himself, a single guy, and he suffered with his lungs. So once in a while he'd have a flare-up, he'd be in bed, he'd be sick, then he'd feel better, he'd come back to the yeshiva. So the previous Rebbe's oldest daughter, whose name was Chana Gerari, took care of him. She was very nurturing. The Rebbe's older sister was very nurturing. She was very maternal by nature. And she would visit him, and she'd bring him cream. In Poland, it was a very poor country. You couldn't get cream, sour cream budget, and citrus fruits, and people with tuberculosis. This is what he told me. I don't know if it was true then. I don't know if it's true now, but you need to get citrus fruits and cream. It's good for tuberculosis. And she would buy it. She would find it. She'd spend a lot of money. She'd bring it to him as a remedy, as a refuah. One day she walks into him. He was not really well. And he tells her, the Frierdiker Rebbe's oldest daughter, I had a dream and I saw your father. So the Frierdiker Rebbe in a dream. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was alive and well at that time. And he said in the dream, Maimer Chassidus, on the pasuk, Rafa'enu ad Hashem ve'erafe, heal me. Rafa'enu Hashem ve'erafe, heal me. And he tells her, and I remember the Maimer. I have the Maimer. You know what that means? The Machterek's uncle didn't have the Maimer, and the Tommy from Lubavitch had the Maimer. He woke up in the morning, he had a dream, he saw the Frierdiker Rebbe say Chassidus, and he remembered it. So when she went home, she went into her father and says, Tatich, I went into battle, Kohen, and said, he saw you in a dream, and you said, so the Frierdiker Rebbe says to his daughter, at Hadar Maimer, does he have it? Did he get it? Does he remember it? And she says, at Hadar Maimer, he remembers it. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, if that's the case, let him go back again to the doctor. There's a man who suffered with tuberculosis probably for 30 years. So he goes to the doctor, they do an x-ray, and there's no tuberculosis. And it doesn't go away. So the doctors couldn't believe it. So they took out the old x-rays. And it was gone. The old x-rays were no longer showing the tuberculosis. Because it says in Chassidus, that some healing heals you from now on. Some healing heals you that you were never sick. The old x-ray, which had showed tuberculosis for years, was clean. And he got married. He even had children. Unfortunately, the Nazis got him, but he actually got married. Am I from dreams? Yeah? So we're not talking here, this is talking about the Eibishter. One form of nevuah is in a dream called chizoyin laila, a vision at night. Those dreams you got to follow, because those are not dreams. Those are prophecy. Let's continue to read. You can also have nevuah during the day when you're awake. When you're possessed, when you're taken over. Tardema means by a fatigue. You become very, very, very tired. You fall down. You have a vision. This is called mare or mar'o. If you look in Chumash, there's chaloim and there's mara. There's two kinds of prophecy in a dream and a prophecy in a mara. Now, I don't want to spend months on this, but I'm going to tell this to you. The Rambam is obsessed with nevuah. He talks about it maybe 5 times at length. The Rambam is very into nevuah, and I feel like the Rambam felt that it was his duty to explain it. The Rambam wrote the whole Torah, but prophecy he talks about again and again and again. In the Moreh Nevuchim, in the Guide to the Perplexed, the second section, the Moreh Nevuchim has 3 sections, from chapter 30 or 31 till the end, and then the first 8 chapters of section 3 are explaining prophecy in a very systematic and a very orderly way. All over the Moreh Nevuchim, there are interpretations of individual prophecies, or there may be 20 chapters or 18 chapters where the Rambam Pashut explains what prophecy is. And in section 2, chapter 45, the Rambam says it is 11 levels of prophecy that go into 3 groups. The first 2 are called the Ruach HaKodesh, a divine inspiration. According to the Rambam, Ruach HaKodesh is a lower level of Nevuah. Then the second group, of which there are 5 levels, is Chaloim, is a dream. And the third group, of which there are 4 levels, is Mara, is a vision. Mara is considered higher than Chaloim. Having a Nevuah in a dream is a lower level. Having in a dream when you're awake is a higher level. And the Rambam goes back and forth 4 times. Chaloim, Mara, Chaloim, Mara, Chaloim, Mara, Chaloim, Mara, Chaloim. Dream, vision, dream, vision, dream, vision, dream, vision, dream. The highest level of Nevuah is you cannot have when you're awake, only in a dream. But the 11 madregas of Nevuah, and they go into these 2 categories in general. One is dreams. People experience Nevuah in dreams, but it's a little different than the dreams you and I have. And the other is when you're awake and you have a vision. Okay? The Pasuk says, the Pasuk. I show myself to them in a vision, in a display, or in a dream. And the Rambam says that's how Nevuah goes, either in a dream or in a vision. And then he says, the kulon, anybody who experiences prophecy, kisha misnabim, when they experience prophecy, evereim is dazin, their bodies, they shake, their bodies shake. The keach haguf koshel, and the strength of the body fails them. Keach haguf koshel means they lose control of their body. Usually, a person can walk upright. The person stands. Yeah, if you're overwhelmed by a force which your body can't handle, you fall. That's the pashut tied to the word keich haguf koshel. Your body falls. You can't handle the experience. The ishtei nesehem is star face. I'm going to look the word up. I'm not going to play games with you.
What for?
The translation of the word Ishtei Neseim, I should really know this. Oh, here it is. Yeah.
It's like to lose the.
They lose control of their senses. Ishtei Neseim, it translates as their senses, their chushim, their eyes, their ears, they lose control of their senses. V'tishoyer hadeya pnuya, so their minds remain clear, evacuated, lahavin mashatira, to understand what it sees. When a person experiences nevuah, they lose control of their guf. Right? Why? Why?
You can't handle it?
Because you're never really ready. You're never really ready. How do you make yourself prepared for Ein Sof?
Oh.
How do you prepare yourself for Ein Sof? As pure as you are, you can be purer. As removed as you are, you can be more removed. As solitudinous as you are, you can be more solitary. There's no limit to how much a person can prepare himself, but ultimately a human being is finite. And Ein Sof is infinite. And when the finite and the infinite meet, it's a crash. You understand? They smash into each other. So even the greatest Nevi'im, like Yeshaya and Shmuel, When they experienced Nevuah, the goof went crazy. They lost control of their body. In Tanakh, you have descriptions how they would prepare themselves. They would prepare themselves. They would go away from all the people. They would sit around. They would meditate. They would sing. They'd play music. They would eat good food. They put themselves in the right mood, in a positive mood. And when they experienced Nevuah, they'd lose control of the goof. They'd go crazy. That's why in Tanakh, a prophet is called Meshuggah. A Navi is called a Meshuggah because on the outside, he doesn't look normal. He loses control of his goof. So the goof looks like Meshuggah. Because no matter who you are, and no matter how much preparation you made, Nevuah is a shock. Your body can't handle it. So they lose control over their bodies. Meaning they ain't safe is a shock. Now, for most people, it would kill them. These people are so pure, it doesn't kill them, but at least it makes them lose control of their goof and their mind. There's an expression, which is, I'll try to bring the Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Tefillah, which is also a level of Nevuah, but it's a lower level called Hafshatas HaGashmis. Hafshatas HaGashmis means you live in your physical body. The Alter Rebbe brings it in the laws of prayer, that you may know there's a Mishnah. That the Mishnah says that the Chassidim Arishonim, early to Chassidim, they would prepare themselves 1 hour before they davened each tefillah. And the davening took an hour, and then 1 hour after each tefillah. Do it 3 times a day, that's 9 hours, just davening. They would wait an hour before davening, the davening took an hour, and took another hour afterwards, 3 times a day. And the Gemara, of course, discusses that you're going to daven 9 hours a day, when are you going to learn Torah? But that's a different discussion. So the Alter Rebbe brings that these Chassidim Arishonim had what was called Hafshatas HaGashmis. They were alive. When they were finished davening, they were still alive. But while they davened, the body did not interfere. Most of us, even when we ate well, and dieted well, and exercised well, and slept well, and the brain works well, still the body holds us back. Hafshatas HaGashmis means you're physically alive, but you somehow transcended, that's the right word. You've transcended the limitations of your body, and you're able to relate to spirituality in a purer way, in a more lucid way. And that's what he's describing here. Yeah, Rukulam and all of them, Kishem Misnabe, when they experience Nevuah Evireim is Dazen, their limbs, organs shake. The power of the body fails them. They can't even stand. Their senses become completely crazy. They lose control of their seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. But as a consequence, their mind remains clear to understand what it sees. Okay? Questions or comments? Questions or comments? I told you we're going to go a little quicker. Right? We've been dragging our feet. We're going a little bit fast. No questions, no comments. Go ahead. Don't be afraid.
Yes. So I know that, I read this from like some Jewish sources, like sometimes like a person can go to heaven and like experience like judgment and then come back down and be completely changed.
You mean out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences?
Yes. Is that considered prophecy as well, or is that something completely different?
I think it's completely different. No, the Rambam asks the question. Hashem came to Bilam in a dream. Hashem came to Lavan in a dream. Hashem came to Avimelech. You know what Avimelech is? The king who abducted Sarah. And the Rambam says, was that prophecy? He says, absolutely not. I don't know what it is, but prophecy it's not. Do you understand? And he explains why. Because the most important component of prophecy is the person's preparedness. If a person has an out-of-body experience, a person has a near-death experience, they are not purified in order to have that experience. They're not qualified for Nevuah. The reason we're learning this is because we are holding by day 4 of the preparation of giving the Torah, where the Jews insist that they want to become prophets, and we all know how that ended. It killed them. They couldn't take it. The goof couldn't hold it. So people claim that those experiences have credibility and they can prove it. There's ways of explaining it. Some people have out-of-body experiences where they see a light. And other people have out-of-body experiences where they see push in a courtroom.
Yeah.
And they come back and they can report. I have a great story about that. I'll tell it to you in a minute. Why not? But it could be true. It can have credibility. But nevuah is not about the story. It's not about the communication. It's about the meaning. The most important thing in nevuah is not what Hashem tells you, is that you experience Him. And that's a very powerful experience. It's powerful in the sense that you, according to the philosophers, there's no such thing as seeing godliness because they don't believe in the idea of godliness, but you have a certitude, you have a certainty that it's Hashem because of the power of the experience. I don't know, I don't understand these things. I mean, Baruch Hashem, I've never had that experience, but to me, it's not, I don't think it's the same thing. It's just, in short, that's the answer to your question. Here's the story. Okay, listen to the story. I have a rabbi who's now deceased, who I actually liked very much. His name was Rabbi Chaim Shalom Rubin. He was the rabbi of a shul across from the police station here on New York Avenue near Empire Boulevard called Beis David Geshem. And I davened in a shul for more than 10 years. Each Shabbos, I'd go over to him, I'd give him good Shabbos, and he'd tell me a story. And I collected a lot of beautiful stories from him. So one of the stories he told me, he heard directly from his father. His father was a tzaddik. His father was a His father was a special yid. He lived here in America called the Doliner Rebbe, the Doliner Rebbe. Dolin. It's a Hungarian chassidus, Galician chassidus, which is somehow connected to Tzans and the bells. He's an integral of every holy rabbi that ever lived. Rabbi Reuben Obershom. And he told me that my father told me that he was a little boy. His grandfather introduced him to the Marsham. The Marsham, the Brejan Erov, he was called the Rav. He was a big Talmid Chacham, and he wrote many Sfarim of Halacha. His family name was Shvadron. If you know Jerusalem, there's Bali Musa, there's famous people today who are like Shvadron. They're his descendants. His family name was Shvadron. He was a chassid. But Rabbi Reuben's father met him. He was an old man. So you hear Rabbi Reuben told me the story when he was about 80. They heard from his father when his father was grown up, that his father met the Brejan Erov when he was a child. So you're talking, I don't know, 125 years ago, 140, a long time ago. And when he met the Brejan Erov, Rabbi Reuben's father's grandfather said to the Brejan Erov, please tell him your story with the bicycles in the Heshels in the Chev. There's a bicycle in the Chev. Yitzchak Isaac gives in the Chev. And he didn't want to tell the story. So Rabbi Reuben's great-grandfather said to this Marsham, you have to tell him the story because he's a descendant of Rabbi Isaac in the Chev. He needs to know the story. It's about his Zayda. So he told him the story. And the story goes like this. This Yid, this Marsham, the Brejan Erov, was a very, very big Eli. He was very bright, very, very smart. And he learned Torah day and night, and he was very successful. He was a big Talmid Chacham. We're talking about a young man, he was a teenager. All of his family were Chassidim. And he was a Misnagin. I'm assuming he felt like, what do I need? Chassidus and smarter than all of them, that guy. He was brilliant, right? When he was 18 years old, he was already a prodigy. He became deathly ill, terminally ill. And he was so sick that they were sure that this is over. They put candles around his head. When a person passes away, you light candles. They thought it was finished. He was very, very, very sick. And all of a sudden, he popped up his back. Boom. What happens? It's happened before. It was a big mess. And he was Ma'alech Yomim. He lived probably in the 70s or 80s. And when he came back, he said, I had a vision. I saw the story you asked me, I saw myself being judged. And he tells the story that he came up there and he went into the court and there was a big argument about him. They were saying he's only 18, he's such a big Talmid Chacham, he deserves to live. And other angels were saying, he doesn't learn Torah for God, he learns Torah for himself. Let him Torah Shalei Lishma. He's not learning Torah for the Eibishter, no for him. And the judges presided. They thought about it, and they said, doom and gloom, send him away. Over, send him, he's dead, he's gonna die. They carry him out of the court, and he's going to wherever souls go on the other side. I don't know, I've never been there, I don't remember. And suddenly he hears from behind him a voice, call him back, call him back. He comes back, and there's a screen, he cannot see, but he hears a voice. And the voice is shouting, and this story happened, people, probably 200 years ago. Probably 200 years ago. Think about us today. Begolos hamar hazeh, in an exile as bitter as ours, you're going to judge a person for learning Torah for the wrong reasons today? 200 years ago. Begolos hamar hazeh, in this bitter exile you can hold. He's learning Torah. What do you want? He can be studying mathematics. But God, you're going to hold it against him? You're going to take his life because he's not learning anything? So there was a big shouting match in the Beis Shamayla, and they changed the psak, and he was back. So he's here, this man, this Berajan Arov is behind this wall, I think it's the Shalom Shvadiram, and he hears this whole argument. So the Malachim, the angels who are carrying him out of this world, he says to them, who's this guy? Who's this guy who's defending me? He says his name is Eisenstein. Hey, it's Eisenstein. And every day he comes here. And if he doesn't like the Piskei Dinim, he changes it. If he doesn't like the verdicts, there's a Jew in Kranheitz named Eisenstein who's a descendant of that man. Kipshute, Mamish. He changes the Piskei Dinim. Can I look at him? Can I see it? He asks. And they raise him up and he sees him. If you imagine you pop up after a story like that, 18 years old, somebody came to heaven and advocated on your behalf. So his family went nuts. You got to go to the Rebbe. He was the Misnagid. I don't need the Rebbe's. But the Rebbe just brought him back from the dead. So he went to Zidichev. Zidichev Rebbe. The say that the Zidichev was that everybody who came saw the Rebbe that day. You didn't wait. There was no, but you waited in the line all day long. And people would go in one at a time. You waited for hours. He was all of 18 years old, but he had just recovered from a terminal illness. He was very, very weak. And they apologized to the people, and they put him to the head of the line. He walks into the Bejanarov, to the Zidichev. He takes one look at him, and he faints. And the Zidichev says in his Hungarian Yiddish, Vus, if you knew Yiddish. You see a Jew for the second time, you have to faint. When you see a Jew for the second time, you have to faint. That's the story. And then he told him.
It was the Rebbe that was the one?
Yeah, the Zidichev Rebbe.
Wow.
And he came to see him. He said, seeing for the second time, not the first time. Now you faint. You didn't faint the first time. And they said, younger man, I'm going to tell you like this. He says, Jews in Galicia are very poor. You have no money. And you're a mayor, you're Pesach. You have to make the Piskei Dinim easier for people to keep halacha. This is a famous fight. Him and the Tanze Rebbe, who also lived in Galicia. Tanze was very strict, and the Bejan Rebbe was very lenient. And they were both Talmidim of the same Zidichev Rebbe. And the Tanze used to scream that the Bejan is a culture Makalam, he's not religious enough. But there was the Zidichev who told him, I need you to give kulas. Make it easy, because people can't afford it. Life is too expensive. Make halacha easier for people. And it's a story about dreams. A good story, yeah? I got time. I got 4 minutes. Okay, questions or comments?
What level of nevuah would that count as?
That's not nevuah necessarily either. It's not necessarily nevuah. In other words, if in that dream, the Zidichev says, take $100 and give it to Shmedel, would that require malachically to do it? Not necessarily. For it to be a navi, listen, very simple. If a simple person has nevuah, it's not nevuah. Because if you're not a chacham, it's not happening to you. What? It's something else. But nevuah that has strict laws about how you have to follow has certain prerequisites. You understand? So I don't know if this is nevuah. It's certainly meaningful. It certainly has truth. But it's like a person sees in a dream, go find this treasure and give it to that person. The treasure is where you told you it was, and you don't have to give it to them. Because it's not nevuah.
So what is,
Huh?
so what is it?
It's a different, it's a lower level. It's Ruach HaKodesh, it's Baskel, there's different levels. But according to halacha, it's not binding. According to Jewish law, it's not binding.
So when the Rebbe or the Baba Sali, for example, make a miracle and change people goral, like someone is sick and is almost dying.
How do you know what they're doing?
Because it's happening.
But what are they doing and how are they doing it? You just used the word goydel.
Goral.
Yeah,
Ah.
you change person's goydel. How do you know what they're up to? I have no idea. I'm just happy to be in the receiving end of that. אנחנו לא מבינים את זה, בכלל לא.
Okay, but you change something in their life. You have to
Yes.
be certain connection with Hashem.
Of course.
Or what the Rebbe says, like I don't know, like some מגלה לנו סוד חדש. So you have to have a certain, I don't know if nebuah the way you
What's
call
the
it,
question?
but what is it? Like when they do it?
We've had this conversation before. In my mind, there's no doubt that Api Alocha, the Rebbe is a Navi. Api Alocha. Baba Sali, maybe, I don't know. Possible. Possible. I've told you this before, that the Tzemach Tzedek had a co-generationalist. During Tzemach Tzedek's lifetime, there was a famous Hasidic Rebbe who had a Ruach HaKodesh, I have no idea. He saw everything. You would walk into his room, he'd tell you your whole past, your whole present, your whole future. Everything that's happened, what's happening, and what's going to happen. It was scary. Rabbi Yisrael Velednik was his name. Yisrael Velednik. I was in a bookstore on Sunday and I saw his photo. So the Tzemach Tzedek, who was his contemporary, said, you cannot have Ruach HaKodesh if you're not a Talmud Chacham. Like it says here. You can't have Nevuah if you're not a Talmud Chacham. So one of the Tzemach Tzedek's children, what about the Velednik? Because he was known as a Pashut Yid, Ish Pashut. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, Vos, rest of the Velednik is a God. What are you talking about? The Velednik is a God, he's a genius. He hides it, he reveals it. The Ruach HaKodesh has preconditions. Nevuah has preconditions. Okay, we'll continue next week. Okay, good morning. Thank you for coming. Chazak, chazak. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, now, a fun call.
Yeah, I sent it to my group chat. I can.
Oh, this guy don't pick up his phone.